I believe that we're in the last of the last days, but the last days will be dangerous times. I think we kind of have come to understand that. And we're going to talk about that this morning. Dangerous times. Confidence can be hard to come by sometimes when you're living in dangerous times. You're like me. You have watched the horror of what's going on in Ukraine. There's a good number of, we've heard, a good number of teen challenge centers across Ukraine. There's a good number of Christian believers and churches that are suffering this morning across Ukraine, and the people in general that are suffering. I do hope we spend time praying for the church in Ukraine and the people of Ukraine, and the misguided. I think some of the Russian soldiers don't even know why they're there. It's just a bad situation all the way around. It's dangerous times. I mean, we just in the last 2 weeks heard thoughts of or talk of, nuclear war, doomsday. We haven't had that kind of talk or heard that kind of talk in an awfully long time, but it's been talked about now. Because if one mistake is made or one wrong thing happens, then you got the whole world at war and potentially nuclear. So we were living in dangerous times. It's just, that was the word God spoke to me. Dangerous times. And the last days, or the last of the last days, will be dangerous times. Paul speaks to Timothy, 2 Timothy 3:1, and this is the amplified rendition of it. And it just worked real good because God gave me the word dangerous times, and I looked up the Amplified Bible. It starts out dangerous times. That worked out nice, didn't it? Dangerous times of great stress and trouble will come. Difficult days that will be hard to bear. Other renderings uses the word grievous times. Some renditions use the word terrifying times, distressing times, and as you see on the screen we have up there a while ago, perilous, the King James Version said perilous times. And I think all of those descriptions, we understand the meaning of those descriptions that Paul writes to Timothy. In this chapter, Paul lists 19 separate issues which are to be condemned. An extensive list of godless traits. Among those godless traits listed in chapter 3 is selfishness, arrogance, slander, the pursuit of pleasure, sensual, self-indulgence, and a denial of the truth of God. And I think we see that in our time in great detail. And some portions of that chapter 3 go like this: for men shall be lovers of their own selves, lovers of money, uplifted in pride, arrogant, given to bitter words, no respect for parents, showing no gratitude. Now I've used various translations that you may not be as familiar with. Lovers of pleasure. Men will put pleasure in the place of God. I like that rendition of verse 4. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, the King James says. Or one rendition says, they will maintain a facade of religion, but in denial of its reality, not giving expression to its power. And he says to keep away from these people. Don't everybody make an exit here. Everybody stay with us here. I don't want anybody to leave. I'm hoping we're not those kind of people. But we understand that people can have a form of religion or a form of godliness, but it's just maintaining a facade of religion, but denying its real power. And what Lynn read to us this morning, it's time to understand we serve a powerful God. Amen. We need to worship Him and serve Him in power. And then we finish up with verse 7. And this is a different rendition, but I like it. Well, I think the King James says, ever learning, but never able to come to the truth. This rendition says, always curious to learn, but incapable of reaching the knowledge of the truth. Always curious to learn, but incapable of reaching the knowledge of the truth. This is the kind of people we're talking about. Paul is saying God's servant Timothy must be prepared to combat these grave dangers. Even at that time, these were things that people had to deal with. Paul warns Timothy not to allow fear of coming danger and peril and trouble to paralyze him for the work that God had called him to do, causing him to lose heart. I mean, we're living in a time when it would be easy to be paralyzed by what we see going on around us. And he says he didn't want Timothy to lose heart or become faint. These times will be especially difficult, disheartening for God's true servants. If you're like me, you're grieved. You're grieving over some of the things that you see, some of the things that you hear on the radio or television, things that you read. It's very grievous to us. Not good. To properly understand what Paul is saying to Timothy, the last days can include the entire time between Christ's first and second coming. That's why sometimes we sort of help to understand when we speak of the last days, we have to somewhat understand that we could be talking about the time of Christ's first coming and second coming. But we also, sometimes I say the last of the last days, and that kind of more clarifies where we are at this particular time. Rabbis of the days of Paul were in the habit of speaking of two great periods of world history: this age, and the age to come. This was how they would speak: this age and the age to come. The same applies here as Paul gives us a foreshadow of the evil state of things in the future, which is our time now. Paul's prophecy says the ungodly behavior in society will accelerate. Didn't anyone believe that? Ungodly behavior in society will accelerate as the end approaches. A widespread collapse of the family. Some people have called the family degenerating or disintegrating. Degenerating or disintegrating. How many knows the fabric of our society is the family that holds everything together? The family fabric is disintegrating. It is disintegrating. It is degenerating as well. Paul says ungodly behavior in society will accelerate as the end approaches widespread collapse of the family, society in general. Truth deniers, the arrogant, the lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God become the mainstream of society. And when I chose that word, I write on a yellow pad, and poor Barb has to buy me a lot of those, because I write on one message. I write sometimes a whole yellow pad of thoughts. And when I chose the word mainstream, I said, God, am I being too harsh by using that particular word? Words are very important to me, but I do believe that these things have become part of the mainstream of our culture and our society. In a provocative collection of essays by Jacques Barzun called The Culture We Deserve, Jacques Barzun is a French-American historian, and he is a history buff of history and cultural history specifically. And he's written about 40 books. I don't know about his worldview, so I can't speak for the 40-plus books that he's written. But I picked up this quote from him in an article that I thought was worth putting in the message. And it was a quote of the essay, part of the essays that he wrote, called The Culture We Deserve. And Jacques Barzun says, the culture is a reflection of who we are. Somebody said yes. Choices we have made, attitudes we've taken, priorities we have established, and whatever culture we have, he says, we deserve it. We deserve it. Very interesting observation. Our end-time culture is one of godlessness, lawlessness, rebellion, crime, and a criminal justice system that is making excuses for the criminals. I can't believe what I'm seeing. They have the no bail. You go out and commit a crime, and the criminal justice system is just a revolving door. You do the crime, and no bail now, and you go back out, and they're finding these people that are let right out, no bail. They just go right, and they go back and commit more crimes the same day. They're let out. It's crazy. The jailhouse door has become a revolving door. The godless, anything goes society is a dangerous and distressing time to be living. The spirit of Antichrist is already at work as history enters its final stages. Come on. Cities are in chaos. Not in our notes, but cities are in chaos. If local governments cannot surrender and defend our streets, and they surrender them to the criminals, the law of the jungle is going to be the one ruling the streets. I think our governments are too busy, local governments are too busy involved in social engineering programs instead of taking care of the people and the citizens, keeping the streets safe. It's true. We need some changes, don't we? Desperately need some changes. This one may be interesting to you, and I have heard of this, and I put this in my message. Back in the 80s, New York City was in the grip of one of the worst crime epidemics in its history. Unfortunately, it's back there again. But this is looking back. And Giuliani, I think, during what I'm going to be describing, was the mayor of the city with this, what I'm talking about, which things got better. But then suddenly the crime rate went down dramatically. Why? It was called the broken window theory. I've heard about this for a number of years, but I wanted to put this in the message. It was called the broken window theory. I had to look up who's the brainchild of the criminologists James Q. Wilson and George Keeling. They argued that crime is the inevitable result of disorder. That makes sense, huh? Crime is an inevitable result of disorder. If a window broken is left unrepaired, people walking by will conclude that no one's in charge. Now, during Giuliani's reign as mayor of New York City, this is when they took this theory of the broken window theory and they operate on that basis. And that's why crime went down under his watch. Here's how it works out. If the broken window is not repaired, people walking by conclude no one's in charge. Soon, more windows are broken. A sense of anarchy will spread from the building to the street it faces, sending a signal that anything's okay and everything's all right, anything goes. Okay? The idea of these two guys, these criminologists, the idea is that crime is contagious. It can start with a broken window and spread to the entire community. And that was the theory. And they took that theory under Giuliani's watch and they brought crime down in an amazing fashion, dramatically, by just taking and operating on this theory called the broken window theory. Now, they have departed from that in a number of years, and now people don't feel safe anywhere in some of the cities. The reason I put this in the message is we need to understand if we live like salt and light and live our lives infused with Christ, it can disproportionately, that little simple broken window that can make crime worse, salt and light in our lives showing forth can change the world. Little things matter. Little things make a difference. That's the point. We become the broken window that has been mended, that's been healed. We are the scrubbed graffiti that God has cleaned us up. How many are glad you've been cleaned up? God has mended the windows, the window of our lives. He has scrubbed off the graffiti. It's time, Lynn, for the church to become the church. It's time for God's people to be salt and light to a dark, broken world. This is the key to making a difference. Deliberate spiritual acts of cultural preservation, following God's call, small individual acts of living like Christ and living for Christ. Come on. It's Matthew 5:13, and ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its flavor, or if its savor, or it's tasteless, wherewith shall it be salted? How will you restore its saltiness? It is henceforth good for nothing. It is good for nothing anymore, one translation puts it. It is trodden under the foot of men. You're the light of the world, a city set on a hill that cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, under a bowl, but put it on a candlestick. And it giveth light unto all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works, and they may glorify your Father which is in heaven. Come on. Jesus said we are to be the salt of the earth. We're to be the light of the world. The message is really cool. The rendition of the message goes like this. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste your godliness? I thought that was so cool. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness if you don't have that? Salt, I found this out. I didn't know this when I researched it. Salt was such an important and valuable commodity in the time of Christ. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt. Did anybody know this? I didn't know it. I'm glad you knew it, Nancy. I didn't know. I love salt. I mean, I knew it was important. And that's where we get the expression, he's not worth his salt. Okay. Salt was used for preserving food from spoilage and many other uses. Salt has great value. I said salt has great value. And you're the salt of the world, of the earth that has great value. Come on. Tammy, our daughter, who's with us this morning, who's one beautiful girl. I have to say, I'm not prejudiced at all. Not a bit. But she is one amazing daughter. She took us down to Southern Pines yesterday morning to Betsy's Crepes. Have you ever been in Southern Pines? Go to Betsy's Crepes. That's good breakfast. But we were walking the streets, and there's a lot of boutiques in Southern Pines, just all over the place. So Tammy walked into a little boutique while we were walking the sidewalks. And there was only, I think there was 2 or 3 workers that were there. She was the only one in the store. And a young girl, her second day on the job, passed out and hit her head and fell. And, I mean, really hurt herself. Tammy happened to be in the store, the only customer there. Tammy went to her and to comfort her and try to bring her back and prayed for her while the paramedics were on the way, which they came very quickly. But and the other store people, were very grateful that Tammy knelt down and prayed for the lady, she's a very young lady, second day on the job, and she hit her head. What happened when she fainted? She hit her head, and they were worried about the injury of that. But what I'm trying to say is God had Tammy there at the right place at the right time. That's what God wants from us, to be the salt and light of the world. He puts us in places at the right point, at the right time, to do His work and His will. Come on. We're the salt of the earth. We're valuable. If you don't think we're valuable when the salt leaves this world, you don't want to be here. You don't want to be here no more. It will not be a nice place to be. Salt was used for preserving, for purifying. Even I was talking with Tammy about my message. She said she's even heard in olden times they would rub salt on newborn babies to cleanse them, for cleansing. Think about that. Jesus clearly described His followers to be salt and light, called to influence and make the world a better place. And I like to say it this way: God wants you to be the salt of the earth, so when you come near somebody, you'll make them thirsty for the living God. You'll make them thirsty. How many's ever eaten food that is very salty, and you better have some water close by, because you'll be thirsty. We need to make people thirsty for God, don't we? I come across, God brought this sermon together because everything I read was something that God wanted me to use for today. There was a song written by Bruce Cockburn, and it was a song called Lovers in a Dangerous Time. Kind of interesting. And some of the lyrics go like this: don't the hours grow shorter as the day goes by? You never get to stop and open your eyes. One day you're waiting for the sky to fall. The next day you're dazzled by the beauty of it all. When you're lovers in a dangerous time. But nothing's worth having comes without some kind of fight. You gotta kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. When you're lovers in a dangerous time. And God spoke a word to me. We are lovers of God. We must kick at the darkness in spiritual warfare until the light of God shines bright. We must be salt and light in a dangerous time. We're living in that time, and God wants us to be that influence that changes the world. And I told Joan to put it in big letters. We are the broken. We're the broken window that God has mended. We are the broken that God has made new. We're lovers of God. How many are glad you're a lover of God? We're lovers of God in a dangerous time. And I do have to bring out a song that I always loved when I was a younger person. And I still love it today, but it was popular when I was younger. You're nobody till somebody loves you. You're just nobody. Oh, Dean Martin could make that thing ring, couldn't he? You're nobody until somebody loves you. How many are glad that number one, we're lovers of God. Number two, we're loved by God. And we are somebody that God truly loves. Let's stand together, could we?